Welcome back to George Music for All Four Seasons. And finally, we have part three of the Charles Alexander interview. It's a great interview filled with great information on his involvement on the CD Working with Bob Gaudio, Audio with a G, Frankie Valli CD Romancing the 60s, some great info on the making of the movie Jersey Boys, and then some information regarding the Beach Boys and the Four Seasons, how the Beach Boys seem to be written about more than the Four Seasons back in the 60s and 70s. But anyway, enjoy the interview. And let me know what you think. Take care. Be well. Bye now. Bob Gaudio, Audio with a G. That Bob Gaudio gives full credit for putting together.
I wrote a whole story about that on the Jersey Boys blog. I could read it to you, but I'll summarize it. That was the one thing. Well, to get quotes, the box set was obviously not my idea, but to get the celebrity quotes from it was my idea. But the only project that was totally my idea was Audio with a G.
Yep.
And I first had the idea in the same year that the box set came out. And also that year, the box set came out in 2007. I went out to LA for the release of the box set. Another thing that happened in 2007 was Frankie started working on this album, or he actually recorded the album in 2007, Romancing the 60s.
Yes.
Album of cover songs of 60s records. They asked me to write not liner notes, but publicity material for that album.
Wow.
And I wrote a bio of Frankie for that album. And that bio is still, without being updated, it's still on the Four Seasons website. The bio I wrote in 2007.
You are correct. Still there.
And I actually updated it a couple of times, and I would send in the updates to Dean Egnater, and somehow they never got incorporated on the website. So it's still there, out of date. They also asked me to write about the songs on the album. And so what I did was I re-interviewed Frankie over the phone. I interviewed Artie Schreck, who arranged half the songs on the phone. That was a very interesting conversation. I interviewed Charlie Colello. That was the first time I talked to Charlie Colello.
Oh, wow.
Actually, the second time, because I got a quote from Charlie for the box set.
Yes.
But I also had a lengthy interview with him about this album. So I wrote that publicity material. And I also, I talked to Bob in 2007. Bob was in New York, and I said, why don't we get together? I have an idea for you. And he was happy with the box set. So he said, yeah, I'll meet you at the Michelangelo Hotel. He was in New York. I remember that talk with Bob Gaudio very well. And he said to me, well, you know, where you're sitting there, not long ago, Steven Spielberg was sitting in that seat, and because he wants to make the Jersey Boys movie, and Martin Scorsese also wants to make the Jersey Boys movie.
Oh, wow.
Well, that was very interesting. I'm excited about, wow, this could be a Spielberg movie or a Scorsese movie.
What happened to
The
them?
thing, what happened with that was Bob, didn't accept their offers. He was afraid that if the movie came out, I mean, the play was going great guns. It was a cash cow, steady stream of money. And so Bob was afraid that if the movie came out too quickly, it would kill the play.
Sure.
So he really dragged his feet. And finally, Spielberg and Scorsese just went on to other things and dropped the idea. And by the time Bob says, okay, let's go ahead and move with the movie, it was years later. Do you guys know the story of who the first director of the Jersey Boys movie was going to be? Do you know that story?
I know bits and pieces. I'm sure Anthony may, but go
It's going to
ahead.
be John Favreau,
John Favreau, right, right.
who had directed one of the Iron Man movies.
Right.
Uh, so John Favreau wrote a script. It was with a different studio at the time. I think it was with Columbia. He was going to do a movie with Columbia, and he wrote a script for it, and it was going to be really expensive. One thing I would love is to see that script.
Yeah.
John Favreau's vision of Jersey Boys, but I've never seen that script. And Columbia looked at it and said, this is going to be too expensive. So it was, quote, put in turnaround, put on the shelf. You know, turnaround means, well, it's kind of dead. So thank goodness for Warner Brothers and Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood saw the show and he said, yeah, I'd do the movie. But you know, why don't we just have the people who wrote the play do a script for the movie? So, you know, so Rick and Marshall did a script for the movie. Eastwood was happy with it, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
I mean, the movie was not a big hit, and people didn't much as play Jersey Boys. I personally liked the movie because it was different from the play. If the movie had been exactly like the play, it wouldn't have been value added. I mean, I think they cut out too much music, but
Cut out way too
I
much.
still liked it. I
agree. I agree. The movie was enjoyable, but like listening to Frankie Valli, their story is much, much darker. I can't even imagine a Martin Scorsese doing that movie. And I still think to this day, there's an opportunity to do it. I mean, you have somebody like Frankie Valli, Bob Gaudio, start out this new movie. You know, you've seen the play, you've seen the movie. Here's the real story, and go into that dark story. I think they could have another hit on their hands with a well-made movie.
Yeah, I think the movie was a step in the darker direction with Christopher Walken as DiCarlo, but anyway, there were some problems with the movie, obviously, including Joe Long playing the guitar right-handed. I can't forgive them for that. That was just bad. That was wrong. That was just bad. But on the whole, I was happy. I was happy to have the movie. I'll tell you one brief movie story, because I went to see that movie in every theater I could. I saw it first in the Ziegfeld Theater in Manhattan. Yeah, Tony, you ever go to the Ziegfeld Theater in Manhattan?
Oh, can't say that I have.
This huge movie palace. It was it and Radio City Music Hall were at one time the two great movie palaces of New York. So I went to see it there, and it was great to see it there. And then I see it in a little tiny theater, one of a multiplex in my neighborhood, little tiny theater. I saw it late at night, and not a lot of people are there. And you remember in the movie, they have the credits, and they're playing I think they play two songs during the credits of the movie. It's been so long since I
Yeah,
watched.
Sherry
One
and
is
Ragdoll.
Ragdoll. What was
Sherry
the
and Sherry and Ragdoll.
Jerry and Ragdoll?
Mm-hmm.
So um, I'm sitting in this theater, and for some reason, when the credits start playing, the picture goes out. There's no picture. The screen is blank, but the music is playing. Nobody in the theater moves. Everybody sits there in the total dark, staring at a blank screen,
Listening to the music.
listening to Sherry and Ragdoll, and nobody moves. And then finally the house lights go up, so people get up and leave. But they all sat there in the dark. Maybe they were afraid they would stumble over the seat or something, but nobody moved until the music was done. I thought that was kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
Uh,
I stayed there right to the last.
you would think they would turn on their phone with their flashlight and exit
Yeah.
the theater. But anyway, so the movie is aside. So anyway, Bob and I are talking about this movie, and then I say, this is 2007. I say, Bob, um, I've got this idea. I think we should do an album where we do all your music
Mhm.
as recorded not only by the Four Seasons and by Frankie solo, but by Diana Ross, Frank Sinatra, all these great stars, the Temptations, all these great stars that did your music. We need to bring this together into one album. And he liked the idea. And he says, I've even got a title for you. You should call it Audio with a G.
Oh, that's
And I
great.
said, that's great. He says, the reason, people are always mispronouncing my name.
Sure,
So
yeah.
whenever I'm spelling my name for people, I say, here how it's pronounced. It's audio with a G. That's how
Gee,
I pronounce my name.
that's great. Yeah.
So with his encouragement, I start working on this. I start gathering songs. Um, it takes a long time to do something like this. I'm researching what other songs can I get. I'm researching, I found out songs that I don't know about, and I'm writing little notes on each song. They're going to be the liner notes, and I'm putting the songs together. And finally, in 2010, later on, when I wrote about this on the Jersey Boys blog, uh, I wrote a paragraph about how this is the first Gaudio collection. I said, it only took me 7 years to get this done, seriously. So it started in 2007 with that conversation with Gaudio. The first demo I had was not until 2010.
Wow.
And by that time, I wanted a package to show Bob. You can't just send Bob some half-ass thing. You gotta have something that seems realistic. So I had two demo CDs, and I had notes on each song, and I had how the liner notes were going to read, and I send the whole thing off to Bob in Nashville.
Yeah.
So he calls me back. I even include a third disc that's rejects. That's some of the most ridiculous recordings of
Bob Gaudio.
Gaudio songs like "Big Girls Don't Cry" by the Moldy Peaches,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Uh, but I sent him two real discs that I thought could be good, and I sent him the liner notes. And so he finally called me back. He said that he and Judy listened to the whole thing on a car trip, including the rejects. I even threw in a song that my son had recorded just for the hell of it. And he
Uh-huh.
told me my son had talent, which I could say to my son.
Great.
uh, I'll borrow a sentence from this thing I wrote on the Jersey Boys blog about what he said to me, that while Bob didn't exactly tell me to come back when you're black, uh, he wasn't very encouraging either.
Or
He liked my album, but thought it would be impossible to pull off because the master recordings I needed were controlled by so many different record companies.
Mm.
So Bob is not really going to get behind this project because he thinks it's going to be impossible. He didn't think a play on Broadway was impossible, but he thought my album was impossible.
Your album.
So, but I wasn't discouraged. So I started talking to people. So in 2010, I flew out to LA. Sorry, I didn't know you, George, when I was going out to LA, or we would have had many fun hours together.
Yes, we would have.
I went out to LA. And I talked to the head of Rhino, who at that time was named Kevin Gore. And he looked at it and he says, "I'd like to help you do this."
Wow.
Now I'm really encouraged. So
Sure.
I'm exchanging emails with him. And of course, he kind of, the head of a company never does it anything himself. He kicks it downstairs, and he, tosses it to some of his executives, and I'm emailing with these people right in fact, and nothing ever happens. You exchange emails with people, and they say, "Oh, this is a great idea. We'll think about this."
Yeah.
Doesn't happen. Rhino's just not doing it, and so then I start exploring other interviews. I go and talk to this guy at Universal Motown, go to his office in New York. I figure they might be interested in putting it out. And I have a good conversation with the guy I know. And then I wrote to a guy who is connected to Ace Records in England. You remember, do you have any of those Ace Records CDs,
Yes.
George?
Have them all.
yes,
For a long time, those were the best
yeah,
season
Oh.
CDs out there.
The
Had
best.
liner notes,
Sure.
everything.
yeah.
Yeah. The best.
And so I thought they might be interested.
Yeah.
And they were interested, but they didn't like the way I wanted to do it. I wanted to have different version because they had done a lot of albums. They had done albums like this for other writers. I think they'd done a Burt Bacharach album.
Yeah.
They didn't want to do it the same way. I wanted to, in some cases, have different versions of the same song to show you how you could take different approaches to Gaudio writing. I wanted to have, Frankie Valli's version of Can't Take My Eyes Off You, but I also wanted to have Nancy Wilson's jazz version.
Sure.
How versatile that song was. I wanted to have Lauryn Hill's version,
Oh yeah.
but I couldn't get that. Sometimes you couldn't get, and it doesn't have any Neil Diamond songs. I mean, he wrote some songs for Neil Diamond, and it doesn't have any of those because at the time Neil Diamond was switching his catalog from one record company to another,
Oh wow.
and I could not get the rights to the Neil Diamond song. So that's one inadequacy in the album. And I couldn't get Lauryn Hill's Can't Take My Eyes Off You. So the Rhino people said, well, why don't you do the Boys Town Gang version of Can't Take My Eyes Off
Right.
to show that it could be a disco song
Mm.
and that and it was a big hit in England. And I wanted to do stuff like that. I wanted to do I ended up putting on the the European remix of Beggin', which was a huge hit in Europe. I wanted to show what people had done with that song.
Sure.
I had different versions of The Night and so forth.
Yeah, that was a weird one.
Ace didn't want to do it that way. They wanted to have, all different songs by all different artists.
Artists. Yeah.
They didn't want to have, I thought like to have, you know, I had 6 songs by the Four Seasons and one by Valli, and I thought that was a minimum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they didn't want to do that. They wanted, to have 24 songs by 24 different artists. That's how they did an album at that time. So Ace and I couldn't come to an agreement. So by 2012, I thought the project was dead. I forgot about it. It was a nice idea. I worked real hard on it.
And you were already what, 5 years into the album by then?
Yes, I was
Yeah.
yeah, I was 5 years in the
5 years
album, but
into
I gave up. And believe me, I don't easily give up on projects. Gaudio once called me persistent. And I am. But I just forgot about it. That's it. It's not the only thing I failed at in my life. I just consider that a failure. So one day in February 10th, 2014, the phone rings again. My phone rings. You never can tell what it's going to be. And it was a guy named Mark Picus, who at that time was the head of Rhino. Of course,
Rhino.
it wasn't a coincidence because Rhino knew by that time, by February, knew that the movie was coming out. Rhino knew that they were going to release the Four Seasons entire catalog, just about, and Frankie Valli's entire catalog. And fortunately, they still had my proposal for this Gaudio with a G. And I said, yeah, we want to do this now. And we want to do it exactly like you've laid it out. And
wow.
And so I said, wow, that's great. So this time, they assigned me the real person who was going to get the rights, who was going to start working on it. And of course, I didn't get to do it exactly as I originally envisioned it. I couldn't get all the songs, and we recorded some other things. I was very happy to get 2 of the recordings of songs from Peggy Sue Got Married, the musical that Bob wrote that was in London.
Right.
And one of those tracks had never been commercially released.
Yeah.
So it actually happened and came out, and it was Flash Phillips interviewed me about it
Oh, did he?
on 60s on 6 and Sirius XM. That was still when it was on 6 and instead of 73.
Yeah.
But the day Flash Phelps interviewed me, it jumped on it jumped on Amazon very high, and then Terry Gross had this program on
Right.
NPR, and she interviewed Bob. And the day she interviewed Bob about this album, it went to number 17 on Amazon. So that was
With a bullet.
And Charles,
that was the high point. So that was a real thrill. So
that is the interview where Bob Gaudio gives you 100% credit for the entire album. That is the interview.
well, I don't think he mentioned me on that interview.
I think
He did. It was an interview he did with, what was that guy's name? Oh, I'm having a senior moment.
thought it was that. Okay,
Jim Bessman. Jim Bessman.
Okay, yeah.
Jim
I've
Bessman
heard two interviews
wrote.
where he gives.
Yeah, he said all I had to do was sign my name on.
Yeah. But anyway, folks, and this gentleman right here, Mr. Charles Alexander, is why we have Audio with the G, and it is a great album. A great album.
I don't know
Good work, Charles.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I don't know anything about the legalities of this, but I would have thought that would have been a CD that didn't have a lot of financial potential. Don't you have to sort of pay like licensing fees to the original publishing companies? I don't know anything.
The licensing fees are pretty cheap.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
It's about 600 at that time. I don't know what it is now, probably nothing, but CD business is practically dead now. But
Yeah.
The only CDs that come out now are big fancy packages from superstars. But
Right, box sets.
but at that time you could put a track on a CD for about $600.
Oh, that's not bad.
It's not bad at all. You do have to get the rights, and it costs a little money.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the CD business was practically dead then. It sold a few thousand copies, which Bill Inglett is the he's the guy who mastered a lot of the great CDs. He was the producer of the box set, and he mastered a lot of music for CDs, and he said that was pretty good at the time, that they sold a few thousand. It obviously didn't sell nearly as much as the Jersey CD.
Yeah, and I think it's something like after 2,000 to 3,000 is sold, anything after that supposedly is pure profit, from what I've understand.
Yeah.
But Charles, if I can ask you, can you share your theory, your thoughts on why the Four Seasons were, in a way, so-called never written about? I mean, it seems like Rolling Stone has no love for this band at all.
I call this I've always regarded it as a definite four-season bias. I think today we'd say there was an elitist attitude about the Four Seasons.
Yes, yeah. No, you're right. But it seems like it's always, Beach Boys, this, Beach Boys, that, Beatles. Yeah, okay. But I mean, what different? Okay, I know the Four Seasons sold a lot of music. The Beach Boys were successful more in the area of album sales. They had a lot of top 20 albums, where the Four Seasons didn't have a lot of top selling albums, top 10, top 15, what have you. But share with us, Charles, your thoughts on why you think the Four Seasons were never written about.
All right. Well, first of all, I would say that the Four Seasons have gained a whole lot of ground on the Beach Boys with the success of Jersey Boys.
And thank God for that.
They are a lot more in the public mind now than they ever were.
Sure. Yeah.
They were in the minds of millions of people as fans, but you're right. And they would get articles, there would be articles about the Four Seasons when they did a concert. So they, people knew them, they were written about, but not necessarily in the, as Tony says, elitist
Exactly.
patients, but they have caught up a lot. And it's not like no critics like them. There's a guy named David Marsh.
Yes, David Marsh.
Very, very prominent rock writer, very respected, has written several books.
Right.
He wrote the liner notes for One Season's collection. And in his books, he has a lot of good things to say about the Four Seasons.
Yeah.
It was also on the other side of the Atlantic, there was a guy named Nick Cohn
Mhm.
who wrote the article in New York Magazine called Saturday Night Fever that led to the movie Saturday Night Fever.
That's right.
So this guy was a prominent writer.
Yeah.
He wrote a book. He wrote a book that I somehow got a hold of when I was in college called The Years of Rock, in which he talked about the whole history of rock music. He didn't have a really long section about the Four Seasons, but it was a beautiful section about the Four Seasons. And he wrote it in the late 60s. It was before their comeback in the 70s. But the few paragraphs he wrote about the Four Seasons were incredible. And he said every time they went into the studio, they came out with a monster hit. And he says there's not much to say about the Four Seasons except that they were perfect. He used the word perfect to describe the Four Seasons. So naturally, when I was collecting the quotes with box set, I got in touch with him, and I I wanted him to do a quote about Sleeping Man because it was only released in England. He said, "I'm not going to do that. Send me a list of other possibilities." So he ended up doing Hugging My Pillow. He was happy to do that and wrote a great quote about Hugging My Pillow. But he was a prominent rock critic and a famous writer who recognized the Four Seasons. So it's not that every critic hated him. And another thing we should point out that people in the business thought the Four Seasons were great. I mean, the Beatles went to see them in England. The Beatles hung out with them in Rome. Hung out with
Right.
Frankie and Charlie Colello.
Charlie Colello, yeah.
They influenced the Bee Gees. They influenced a lot of people. People covered their record. Quincy Jones thought they were great. Barry Gordy signed them to Motown.
Right.
People in the business, they were in the rock of they were inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1990, only 5 years into the Hall of Fame, and only 2 years after the Beach Boys. So the people in the business thought they were great. There were some rock critics, but yeah, Rolling Stone, no. Rolling Stone ignored them.
Not even one song of theirs in the top 500.
Yeah, not one song. Can't Take My Eyes Off You had 200 cover versions, but it's not in the Rolling Stone top 500 songs. So it's
Go figure.
It was ridiculous. So why?
Yeah.
So I have an evolving theories about this. I've actually been thinking about in recent days. Tony put his finger on it. It was sort of an elitist thing. First of all, it was sort of socioeconomic.
There you go.
The first of all, the Beach Boys were privileged California kids. The Four Seasons were not privileged. They grew up on the mean streets of Newark, so they wrote very different kinds of songs, and they wrote them early on, and they influenced other people. They wrote songs about you know, trying to be a big man in town. They wrote songs, "Don't go away," because, you know, I'm not rich enough for you. I'm
Right.
good for you. Marry the rich guy.
Yeah.
They flipped that over and wrote Ragdoll. I love Ragdoll, but I can't marry her because she's poor and my parents will never accept her.
Yeah.
I can't let her. I can't let her know how much I love her. Uh, so,
Good
so,
songs. Good songs.
uh, so these were the type of songs that Four Seasons wrote about climbing out of poverty, becoming a big man,
Yeah.
impressing a girl, getting the girl, even though money, I don't have any, I'm down to my last penny. The Beach Boys were writing about hot rods and surfboards, and the
Hebert.
Four Seasons fans weren't going surfing. They didn't have hot rods. Um, so it was kind of a social economic thing. The privileged elitist kids went on to become rock critics at Rolling Stones,
That's right
and
there.
some of us became quite successful, but I didn't. I've I didn't start out as an editor of Time magazine. My first years were as a teacher, and then I switched into journalism, and I started out at Time at the lowest rung. So I was not a privileged kid. So I related to these songs. So it was kind of a different audience. Um, and I've been thinking the last couple of weeks, I've been listening to, there's this thing on Spectrum Internet. Uh, there's a series of cable channels. I don't know if you get them on yours, Tony, or your
I
cable,
do.
George.
Yeah.
Music Choice,
Mhm.
and they have at least two channels that play a lot of Four Seasons. They have solid gold oldies in the '60s, and they play a lot of Four Seasons and a lot of Beach Boys. I would say they give them kind of equal play. And so I've been listening to that lately while I'm, doing mundane tasks like putting moisturizer on my skin or brushing my teeth. Uh, and I noticed another difference between the Beach Boys and the Four Seasons. Now, I want to say that I think the Beach Boys were great and I love them. And "Don't Worry Baby" is one of my favorite songs. But when I started hearing the whole breadth of songs, there were these other Beach Boys songs like "Be True to Your School" is a Beach Boys hit. The Four Seasons would never record a song like "Be True to Your School." They weren't in school. They were high school dropouts. Uh,
So much for
Go
being
to
true.
the
la la la.
Beach Boys recorded a song called "When I Grow Up to Be a Man." The Four Seasons would never record a song like that.
No,
They were men.
they were men.
They the Beach Boys had a big hit with "In My Room." I'm in my room dreaming about. The Four Seasons weren't in their room. They were out working. Bob Gaudio was at a printing plant. Frankie Valli was a barber. They were at night, they were singing their songs in nightclubs. They were out working. They weren't
Exactly.
in their room daydreaming. They weren't out surfing. They weren't hot rodding.
No.
They
It
were
was
relatable. They were relatable, right?
Yeah, the Beach Boys were relatable to the privileged kids, and the Four Seasons were relatable to all of us who had to go out and get a job. And I think, and another thing to remember was that the Four Seasons were older, and I think Four Seasons fans, on average, were older. Uh, Generally, I started when I was 12. I bet a lot of Beach Boys fans started when they were 7. Uh,
Yeah.
and with all these songs about "When I Grow Up to Be a Man" and so forth. Uh,
Yeah. So you could say maybe the Beach Boys had a lot more youth appeal.
Well,
Or
they were catering
to that, to that?
an
Got
even younger audience. And remember, the Four Seasons were trying to have it both ways because they started out in clubs playing for adults.
Right. That's
correct.
how they started.
And when the Four Seasons hit, adults liked them. I had an aunt who's 25 years older than me, but took me to two Four Seasons concerts, and she really liked them. Uh, Older people liked the Four Seasons, and they kind of catered to that because their early albums, they did these covers of songs from an earlier era, the doo-wop, the harmony songs.
Right, right.
Sherry album had Never on Sunday on it and
Yeah.
other
I
old
just must
songs.
the great
That's why my wife
Oh, that's,
dropped. My wife bought Sherry when she was 12 and liked Sherry and Big Girls Don't Cry, but she didn't like any of the older songs.
yeah.
And they were, when they first did concerts, they would do all those old songs, and they appeared on like the Steve Allen show. And
Right.
Steve Allen, and they sang Brotherhood of Man on the Steve Allen show, and Steve Allen would say, well, there's a lot of junky music out there and Beatles and all this hippie
Right.
stuff, but here's the Four Seasons
I remember
singing
that
good
stuff.
music.
Yeah.
And so the Four Seasons were trying to sell songs to both young kids and
Kids.
older people, and they did that. So I think they had on average a slightly older audience, and the older, slightly older audience went out and got a job. The Beach Boys, the Beach Boys audience got older, went to college, they got into drugs. The Beach Boys got into drugs. That's
Right.
one big difference between the Four Seasons and the Beach Boys was that the Beach Boys got into drugs and did kind of druggier things. I mean, I like Good Vibrations is a real good song, but
Sure it is.
it's very kind of, you know, it's kind of druggy, Good
Yeah.
Vibrations.
Yeah.
And the Four Seasons were not into drugs. I mean, Gaudio could write a song like Begging, which was so ahead of its time that it
Mhm.
wasn't a huge hit, and is still, recently an Italian version of Begging was the most streamed song on Spotify in the entire world.
Wow.
So Gaudio was writing good stuff, but it
Sure.
wasn't particularly druggy stuff. Now the Four Seasons did, so music changed and it became very druggy, it became very hippie, and it was good. I liked it too.
Same here.
It took me a while to get into it.
Mm-hmm.
It took me longer than some people, but I eventually became a Rolling Stones fan and so forth, and appreciated what they were doing. But I never did drugs myself, so
Right.
if it was really druggy, when the Beatles started doing "I Am a Walrus" and when they got very druggy, I liked the Beatles a lot less then.
Mhm.
So the Beatles did Sergeant Pepper, and that sort of changed music. They did Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Well, we
Yeah.
know what Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds was. LSD, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. They were very into drugs. Uh, I think they became contemptuous of their fans. Uh, uh, a song like "I Am the Walrus" or "Hello Goodbye," they were just, the Beatles fans would buy anything. Um, so I'm a huge fan of the Beatles, but not so much that
Same
drug.
here.
Then they
Yeah.
came back. They did good later songs. I mean, "Let It Be" was a great album, and
Mhm.
Abbey Road was a great album. So,
Sure. Sure.
but it was a very different. Now, the Four Seasons recognized that music was changing, and they had to change. So they realized they had to do a concept album. And they did Genuine Imitation Life Gazette with Jake Holmes. Interestingly, I actually got to write a story about Jake Holmes before I ever wrote about the Four Seasons, but that's another
Oh,
story.
really? Oh, okay.
But so they realized that they needed to do a concept album, but they were late to the game. The first two great concept albums were Sergeant Pepper by the Beatles and Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys, both pretty druggy, particularly Sergeant Pepper.
Which,
So the Four Seasons did a concept album, but they were 2 years late. And though those songs were great and interesting, they also were more mature. Uh,
very,
they on the Genuine Imitation Life Gazette album has an album about wondering what your children are going to grow up to be. They were
right.
more mature songs.
Yeah.
They had a song about ladies at a tea party, Mrs. Stately's Garden.
Saturday's
It
Five.
was a much more mature album.
Yeah.
Frankly, I would say that the Four Seasons have always done more mature music than the Beach Boys. The Beach Boys they've done great music, but it's always been about fun, 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 you know, doing drugs, uh,
Yeah.
you know, some love songs. They had some great
Yeah.
songs, but it was just more of a fun thing where the Four Seasons have always been more mature and serious. And when Frankie put out a solo album, he covered some of those great old standards like Secret Love.
And I love it.
They
Oh,
realize that they have a lot of older fans, and they've always wanted to please not only young people but older people.
right.
But you know, the nice thing is uh, the you know, even Rolling Stones finally had to recognize uh, the Four Seasons. I think the low point for the Four Seasons in Rolling Stone was, I think, their review of the Helicon album. Rolling Stone described the Helicon album as pure pop for pure fools. So I kind of resented that. I took that personally.
Why
And
not?
of course, they would have these rankings of groups, and the Four Seasons would be nowhere.
Yeah.
Uh, but finally, uh, the Jersey Boys came out, and and even Rolling Stones had to recognize that.
Yep.
And notice I visited you know, the Four Seasons, I think, have always been given their due in the Rock Hall of Fame, except the Rock Hall of Fame hasn't put Joe Long in, but that's another complaint. But
Yeah. Yeah. Terrible.
they got their due from the Rock Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And even I visited the museum at Woodstock, even at Woodstock, which is the temple of hippiedom.
Yeah.
If you go into the Woodstock Museum, you will find a mention of the Four Seasons as one of the big groups is the 60s. So they're even recognized in the Woodstock Museum.
Well, that's nice to hear.
And Rolling Stone finally had to give in. Jan Winter went to see Jersey Boys and said, okay, this was a pretty good thing. You guys got to do something about Jersey Boys. So Bruce Springsteen himself went to see Jersey Boys, and he went backstage to meet the Jersey. Bruce Springsteen, whose manager refused to give me a quote.
Yeah, exactly.
He went to see Jersey Boys. He went backstage to meet the actors. And by the way, the final Bruce Springsteen note is that, you know, in Bruce Springsteen's recent album of covers, he
Yeah.
covered the sun ain't gonna
The sun
shine
ain't gonna
anymore.
shine anymore. Yep.
So now
Well,
Gaudio's genius has been recognized by Bruce Springsteen.
Goes genius.
So Rolling Stone runs a picture with a little tiny story about Bruce Springsteen going backstage to meet the Jersey Boys. And then when Rolling Stone did a picture story, splashy, multi-page picture story about great highlight moments in the history of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They had a picture of the Four Seasons induction into the Hall of Fame. So they did that. And I was responsible for getting one more mention of Frankie into Rolling Stone, because there was a guy, you know, I forget his name. Oh, another thing, Tony talked about elite media. The New York Times has written a couple of times about the Four Seasons.
Mhm.
The first time they wrote about a concert that I actually attended at the Bottom Line
yeah.
in Greenwich Village, Bottom Line, hip
Oh,
club. That was when,
They separate it.
yeah, that was when Gaudio was trying to establish the Four Seasons as a separate entity.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, when they first decided to split up, Gaudio decided, well, you know, these four guys are talented, you know, Saccone, Shapiro, Paiva, and
Yeah.
Fulci.
and Polchi, yeah, who could sing like heck.
Sure.
Guys are really talented, and I want to record for them. And Mike Curb, who had recorded their big comeback hits on his label, he was interested. So he was encouraging Gaudio to do this, to write for these guys. At one point, they thought maybe the name of the group would just be Gaudio.
Ah,
Anyway, they wisely decided that wasn't going to work. But they did want to establish the Four Seasons as a separate entity. So they wrote the album. He wrote the album Helicon. Oh, by the way, you know, as I'm sure both of you know, but maybe not everybody knows there, uh, when Frankie Valli came back and had several solo hits, My Eyes Adored You, Swearing to God, Our Day Will Come, Gaudio is starting writing stuff for the group, but I don't know if he had in mind then that the Four Seasons would make a comeback. Maybe at that time they were just beginning to think maybe the Four Seasons should be a separate group. Um, and so the first recording of Whose Loves You, as you probably know, had Don Ciccone singing
yeah.
lead on that.
Yeah.
Frankie heard it and said, "This is great. This is going to make a Four Seasons comeback. I want to do the lead on it." So they redid it with Frankie as the lead. But anyway, they still had this idea of splitting up and having two separate recording entities. So they record all these songs for Helicon. Some have Frankie on them and some don't, as you know. Some
Right.
Helicon songs don't have Frankie Valli. So they did decide to do some concerts, and they scheduled one at the Bottom Line, and they're going to try to break the Helicon album and get some hits without Frankie. And so the New York Times must have been intrigued that the Four Seasons were not appearing at Madison Square Garden. They were doing a gig at the Bottom Line. What is this
Yeah.
about? So the Four Seasons, the New York Times sent a guy to cover it.
Yeah.
So Frankie comes out. They open the concert with "Who Loves You" with Frankie singing, and then uh, Frankie says, I've got really talent. The rest of the Four Seasons are really great. They've recorded some songs on their own, so I'm going to turn the stage over to them. So then they do a whole set of the Helicon songs that don't have Frankie. Uh, I'm delighted. This is something new.
Sure.
I'm tired of concerts where I hear all the same songs, and to hear all these new songs in concert, I'm really excited about this. But of course, there's some people in the audience are getting restless. They want to hear the hits. So
Ah,
then Frankie comes back and they do "Oh What a Night," and he does the Sherry medley with them to keep people from going out demanding their money back. But they really had this concert. So the New York Times did a column about this concert, and it was a little bit, it was slightly snide, but it said that these guys were very talented. It made kind of a snide comment about all the tough looking guys in leisure suits standing around. Uh, but
ah,
it praised the musicianship. So it wasn't a bad article. So that was one time that the New York Times actually did an article about uh, a Four Seasons concert.
mm-hmm.
Fast forward to when was it? I guess it was 2007 when this Romancing the 60s came out and Jersey Boys was going strong. Romancing the 60s, the Motown hired me to write publicity material for that. And they also recruited this guy. Gee, I wish I could remember his name. To something. I think his first name was Anthony. Would you know Anthony? Guy who used to write for Rolling Stone.
I never read Rolling Stone.
Anyway, it was
Yeah.
it was it was a guy whose first name was Anthony. He was a good writer. He wrote a lot of. He was kind of freelance. He wrote a lot of stuff for Rolling Stone. And the public Motown publicists had gotten him to pitch a story to the New York Times about Frankie Valli's comeback in Jersey Boys and the whole thing. And the Times agreed. And you may remember that article that he wrote, and it was on the front page of the Arts and Leisure Sunday section. It was really a nice big article. But when I wrote this publicity material, the bio of Frankie, and I wrote in the bio, I had a synopsis of the best quotes that I'd gotten for the box set. And I had this great quote from Barry Gibb about how, Frankie had a landmark voice and he was our inspiration and so forth. Um, so Motown gave my publicity material to this writer who was writing for the New York Times. And he didn't really use any of it to speak of, maybe a fact or two, but he didn't use much for the article. To his credit, he put his own thoughts and work into it. But he obviously read those quotes because the next time the Rolling Stone compiled one of their lists of the greatest singers of all time, they still didn't give Frankie his due. I think they ranked Iggy Pop as a greater singer than Frankie Valli.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Frankie at least made it into the list. I think at number 93 or something.
Correct.
And uh, and I knew that writer who wrote the article for the New York Times, I knew he had written the Frankie Valli entry because he used that quote from Barry Gibb that I had supplied to him. So that was how I finally got Frankie into one of the Rolling Stones rankings. not
Great.
very indirectly, and
Yeah.
not high enough, but at least Frankie is mentioned.
Yeah. Charles, if I can ask you, could that writer either be Anthony DeCurtis or Anthony
Yes,
Bosa?
Anthony DeCurtis. That was
Anthony
it.
DeCurtis. Okay.
Anthony DeCurtis. Yes,
Yeah.
that was the one. What I wrote went to him, and he didn't use most of it, but he did use that one Barry Gibb quote in Rolling Stone.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Well, I'll tell you, Charles, you have shared a lot of information. Just good information. Anthony, any questions for Charles?
No. After that, I have no questions. That was not only informative, but tremendously entertaining. Enjoyable.
Yes, very. Charles, I'm sorry, Anthony.
I was going to say any Four Season fan would just would love this. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Four Seasons fan, a music fan. There's so much info. Any communication between you and Gaudio today, Charles?
No, not much. Gaudio, he's a very private guy.
Very.
His emails are screened.
Oh.
I'm not, there was a time when I could email, Gaudio and I were emailing regularly. I mean, there was one time back in the day, there was a guy in England named Phil Elms who used to do a weekly, he was a newspaper editor. By the way, the elite people in England are real fans of the Four Seasons. The BBC once did a 4-part documentary on the Four Seasons.
And it's a great one.
And this newspaper editor is a huge fan. And every week he did a video thing on YouTube about what was in his newspaper that week. And he and I concocted this game where he would slip the title of a Four Seasons or Frankie Valli song into this video. And we had a contest. I don't think were part of this email group, George.
In the early 2000s, yes. And I remember seeing some of your writings.
I don't know this. Let's see. I don't.
Like in 99 through 06.
When was this exactly? I don't remember exactly when this was, but he would, because I don't remember you entering this contest. Maybe you did.
No, I didn't enter the
contest. But it was a contest to see who could be the first person to identify which song was in the newspaper video. He even had a story one time. His newspaper did a story one time about a person who had to chase a fox off his property, and he slipped the song "Fox in a Bush" in his video commentary, and it took a real Four Seasons fan to pick that one up.
Yeah.
One time for the last video in this contest, he put in the names of 7 Four Seasons songs. But anyway, the first person in our email group to identify the correct song, got some points. And I had to divide it into British fans and US fans, because the British fans were up earlier and they got the first crack at the video. And this is a long way of saying that finally I declared 7 winners of this contest, because I said the winner of this contest is going to get an autographed album, autographed by Bob Gaudio.
Oh.
So that's why everybody entered the contest. And that was how confident I was in my relationship with Bob Gaudio.
Gaudio.
And I ended up uh, I ended up declaring 7 different winners of this contest. It was the trophies were going to be presented. We had this convention in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Four Seasons fan. Did
Oh,
you come to that? I don't remember seeing you there, Anthony.
no, I was not. I remember it though, but
Yeah,
I didn't either.
you
You were there,
probably
man.
heard about it. We got Joe Long to come, and we got Dimitri Callis to come,
right.
and
Yeah.
it was great. They told great stories,
Oh, I can't even imagine. Oh, wow.
and so I knew who was coming to this convention, and so I declared 7 different winners, including Johnny Hornsby, who was one of the organizers of the convention.
Yeah.
Anyway, I declared 7 winners. So one day I knew Gaudio was in New York a lot because of the play. So I said, Bob, can I meet with you? I really need a favor from you. I really need to get your autograph for somebody. And he says, okay, well, I'm gonna be at the August Wilson Theater on such and such a day. I'll meet you at the Cafe Nicole, which was in the Novotel across the street. It was where we had a famous party, Jersey Boys party that the Four Seasons showed up to that I organized. But anyway, that's another story. But he said, I'll meet you at the Cafe Nicole. So he did come over from the theater. He met me. And I said, look, I had this contest. I've declared 7 winners. I've got 7 albums here from my collection. Would you please autograph these 7 albums for me? And so he painstakingly did this for me. I'd say, okay, this one is to Johnny. So write to Johnny. And he says, okay, what should I say to Johnny? So I kind of told him what to write on the album.
Oh, Jesus.
And so he did these 7 albums for me. And so I presented them at the Raleigh convention, and we took a picture with all of them holding up their albums, and they loved that. So that was how good I was in with Bob Gaudio.
Bob Gaudio, yeah.
At one time. Another thing was, I think the last meaningful contact I had with him was at my high school in Tennessee. People knew about my connection to the Four Seasons, and they wanted to write an article in my high school magazine about my connection to the Four Seasons.
Oh, geez.
But the writer said, I would really like to interview Bob Gaudio. And so I said, well, I'll see if he'll do it. So I emailed Bob, and he said he'd be willing to, if they send me some questions, I'll write some answers. So he actually did that for me. He kind of ignored the questions and just wrote whatever he wanted to.
Yeah.
And he wrote a bunch of funny stuff, and so the writer got our article. So that was a wonderful thing for him to do to me,
Very.
to give quotes about me to my high school magazine. But that was, I really asked too much of him. Another thing, I used to pester him about stuff because Bob had a hard time saying no. He could say, I would think about it, but he was not at all confrontational or anything. He was a little bit on the shy side. He was very funny, but he just didn't want to turn people down or say no. He was very aggressive when he was pitching something to somebody. And that's why he was very good to me because he knew I was helping him by writing that article, by writing the liner notes, by doing the box set. You know, he was good to me because I was helping Bobby businessman.
Sure,
And
yeah.
and he did some things that were really not to his advantage. But I kind of wore out my welcome. I kept pestering him. One of my friends had this idea that he said it's the 40th anniversary, so this would have been in 2009, the 40th anniversary of Genuine Imitation Life Gazette. We ought to have this reunion thing.
Oh God.
So I started pitching to Bob. I said, let's have a reunion dinner on the 40th anniversary of Genuine Imitation Life Gazette. Let's have it at the Bitter Inn where you first saw Jake Holmes.
Yeah.
Let's get you and Jake together. And if Frankie is somewhere in the neighborhood, he'll come and we'll have some fans. And it'll be this great reunion. And Bob said, well, I don't know. I'll think about it. But, you know, I thought I could persuade him to do that. Um, and I kept after him about it. Jake Holmes said he would come.
Oh
So I really thought it was going to be a great thing. But Bob didn't want to do it. But instead of saying no, he just said, well,
yeah.
I'm not sure. Let me look at my
Yep.
schedule, blah, blah, blah. And I remember the last time I actually saw Bob was Frankie was doing a concert in Nashville. I had business in Nashville. Uh, I took a lot of the people I had business with. I said, "You want to go to a Four Seasons concert tonight?" Uh, you know, so I bought a bunch of tickets. Uh, I got this group together. You know, they wanted to meet Frankie Valli, and I said, "Well, I don't know if I can do that."
Yeah.
But I went to the an interesting thing about me and Frankie Valli. I've told George this is that even though I'm sort of still a Frankie, my bio is still on Frankie Valli's website, so I'm still sort of the official biographer of Frankie Valli. He's never really gotten to know me. He's given me two good interviews on the phone, but in person, I always have to reintroduce myself.
Reintroduce yourself.
Yeah, not
You
so
know,
far.
I would say, hi, I'm Charles Alexander. I wrote that article about you in Time Magazine. And he would say, oh, that was a good article. Thank you.
Very
And
generic.
then I would see him again after another concert and I
Yeah.
look at me blankly and say, hi, I'm Charles Alexander. I wrote that article in Time Magazine. Uh, and he'd say, oh, that was a good article. And then later on, I would say, hi, I'm Charles Alexander. I gathered all those quotes of that box set. And he would say, oh, you did that? That was really good. I like that. And that night in Nashville, I went to the venue uh, to try to make contact with Frankie's road manager. And I got there right when the bus pulled off, and Frankie got on the bus, off the bus, and said, oh, Frankie, I'm bringing some people to see you tonight. I had to introduce myself again and what I'd done. Probably I said, I wrote the liner notes to Jersey Boys. Anyway, but I still, you know, I couldn't say to Frankie, and can I come backstage afterwards? So I went to the venue again before the show, about an hour before, see if I could get in to see somebody, to get in to see Frankie's manager, because these people are with really wanting to see Frankie. And of course, Bob lived in Nashville at the time. I'm sitting here kind of wandering around the lobby, and there's Robbie Robinson.
Ah.
Robbie recognizes me, and so he comes up and he takes me backstage and Frankie's not around, but there's Bob and Judy sitting there.
Oh,
And I'm so that was my last conversation with Bob, and he's telling people he knows who I am, and he's joking with people. That's when he said to these people, "Yeah, I thought I was going to get the cover of Time magazine, and the story winds up in the business section."
that's
So
great.
I had gone so far on this dinner idea, the Genuine Imitation Life Gazette idea, that I had gotten a former Time magazine art director to do up a mock cover of Time, not of Time, but of Life magazine, that was like a cover that said, I'll have to send you this, George, if I can find it on my computer.
Yeah, I'd like to see
Printed
that.
it out, and it said Genuine Imitation Life, and it had the Life logo and big.
Oh,
40th anniversary of the Four Seasons breakthrough album, and it had pictures, and you know we did pictures on the cover of this mock magazine. There was a picture of
Cartoon.
Frankie and Bob and Jake, and then we had a picture from the album of Lisa and Danielle as little girls.
mm.
And let's see if I can remember. Under Bob's picture, I had written, I felt I wanted to stretch myself, or some actual quote from Bob about why he wrote this album. Uh,
Uh-huh.
and I put under Frankie's album something about, uh, I still wanted to be the big man in town or something. I
Yeah.
forgot what I said under Frankie's picture. Under Jake, you remember in Genuine Imitation Life, the newspaper, there's this silly picture of Jake riding on a tricycle. I
Yeah.
had that
Yes,
picture
yes.
on the cover, and I had Jake saying, I was only in it for the spaghetti. And I had a picture of the little girls, and their picture was in the album. And I had the little girls saying, "We never got paid," because they were on that.
Great.
We never got paid. And then I had a little thing on the bottom, uh, and and it also says plus Joe Long and Tommy DeVito. And their quote was, "They weren't just two guys with a side, we weren't just two guys with a side deal. We were on that album," or something.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then I had 40th anniversary, bottom line. So it was a great phony cover of Life magazine. And I happened to have that printed out. And I showed it to Bob. And he was fascinated that I had done this. And he said, "Who did this?" And I said, I got a real art director from Time magazine to do this. So he took the album, and I think he gave it to Danielle. So I thought, this thing is really going to happen now. Bob likes this
Yeah, really.
mock-up I've done of the 40th anniversary dinner, but
Never happened.
it never happened. It's like, in your great interview with David Case,
Thank you.
sometimes things you think Bob is going to do, he
Yeah.
never shows up.
Well,
They never happen.
let
And
me tell you something, Charles. I am in complete awe of your workings and your relationship with Bob Gaudio. It is my dream someday, I have to meet Bob Gaudio. I want to meet him so bad. 2 minutes. Thank you for your work. I have to meet Bob Gaudio. When Frankie came to, well, when he went to the Hollywood Walk of Fame to have his star, it was advertised as Frankie Valli and Bob Gaudio attending that night. And I know this may sound ridiculous to a lot of people. I could not sleep. I could not sleep because I said 8-9 hours from now, I am going to meet my musical hero genius, Bob Gaudio. Then I'm there 2 hours. I find out he's not showing up. I sunk. I mean, just sunk. But then when I saw Frankie Valli arrive and the attention he paid all of us, that took over. But I just have to meet Bob Gaudio someday. Bob Gaudio to me is what Paul McCartney and Brian Wilson are to others.
Yeah,
He is.
I'm envious of your being there for the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I watched that video. Saw you out there, and
Actually, I talked to you
yeah.
that day. I talked.
Yes, we talked. That was the first time we actually talked.
Yes, I told Gia how
Gia.
I admired the interview they did with Charles on her YouTube channel. Before I know it, she had Charles Alexander there on the phone, and we were FaceTiming.
I know that was the first time we talked, and I was envious, and I understand totally. There was a guy. I understand totally. There's this guy I mentioned in England, the newspaper editor, whose name Philip Elms. His ambition was to meet Gaudio, and
go ahead.
Fortunately, I was able to arrange that because when
do me a favor, take him. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Take him in.
When
Okay, thank you, Yvette.
I'll just wait till you get back and
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I
have a few more minutes. I have someone downstairs. Go ahead, finish, Charles.
All right.
Go ahead. Sorry.
All right. So when Jersey Boys opened in London, I got tickets for a whole bunch of fans to not only see the opening night of Jersey Boys London, but to go to the after party. So this newspaper editor and several other fans got to meet Bob Gaudio.
Wow.
I wish I could do that for you, but
I can't even. Again, I know I sound like a little kid in a candy store or something, but it is just a dream of mine. Oh my God.
I think the last straw, I used to pester him about things like this, trying to get him to do stuff. And I think the last straw was when he was down in Nashville actually producing some country records, and I sent him an email with 2 demos from a New Jersey country music writer, and I said, these are really good songs.
Wow.
I think that was the last straw. He didn't answer that email, and this guy's going to send me demos from
Jersey country music.
But
Yeah.
who knows? He just became so big and so many people wanted him. I just sort of fell out of his inner circle. I was never in his inner circle, but I was sort of.
But you had a relationship with him.
Yeah, and for a while, for a few glorious years there, I wasn't in his inner circle, but I was in kind of the second orbit.
Right.
And it was good, and he would answer my emails. But now he's so big and so in demand. He just doesn't have time for me anymore. He might have gotten mad at me because, do you know about the Jersey Boys suit that went on for 10 years?
Yes.
I was deposed in that. And they deposed me for a whole day, and they subpoenaed tapes of every interview I had with Bob Gaudio.
You're kidding me.
And I turned over my interviews, and I wondered if Bob ever thought that I, should have sucked it up and been a true Italian, and not giving over everything. So he might, I don't know. He might have gotten irritated at me because of that. That lawsuit cost him a lot of money. but anyway, and
Yeah, because they
one time I reckon, so I don't know why he did answer one email in the last few years when I asked him if someone had thought that he was playing keyboards in a Tanya Tucker video, because it was a guy who looked a lot like Bob. And so this guy asked me to ask Bob if that was him. And he wrote one of his cryptic emails back that said, maybe, definitely not.
Okay. Well, look at Charles, I think we're going to end with that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Charles. You have so much to share. Anthony, any closing comments?
Oh, this is a bit of a digression, but do you know anything about, there was supposed to be a Jersey Boys movie, the movie version of the play. Whatever happened to
With Nick Jonas. With
Right.
Nick Jonas as Frankie Valli.
Right.
I don't know the answer to that. That's one of
Yeah.
my
No
big-
one does. I think someone must have decided it really wasn't very good and just shelved it, put it in the turnaround,
we know Bob is a perfectionist.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I think
maybe it didn't quite make the cut.
Yeah, yeah,
Too bad. I'd sure like to see it.
yeah, yeah.
So would I. Charles, thank you. Thank you for Jersey Beat. Thank you for this book, your writings. Thank you for Audio with a G. Thank you for everything you have done with Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. It is much appreciated. I am a fan of yours, and I look forward to keeping in touch. Okay. And with that, I guess we'll end the show.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys for keeping the music alive. You're doing more than me right now. Thank you.
Our pleasure. We'll let
Thank you,
David Case know that we interviewed you. He'll be happy about that.
Yes.
Well, send me a link when you get it up, and
by all means,
send it to David. And I'm serious, Anthony. David's going to get us together at his house in New Jersey, whether you like it or not. And George, if you want to buy a plane ticket, you're in.
I'm trying to make arrangements to schedule something, but I have to see how that goes. But one day, I look forward to meeting all of you. Okay.
We have to do this in person.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, it'll be great.
Okay.
Great.
Great.
Hey, are you familiar with Dennis Dykin, Charles?
Oh yeah. He's very, very.
Yeah,
very nice to me. We have a great relationship.
Yeah,
I go to see the Smithereens, and he sits down and talks to me. What a great guy.
Oh, yeah, that's nice.
He's committed to one of these interviews. I told him we were interviewing you, so he's committed to an interview. He said he'd let me know when it's available. He called me recently because the Smithereens were appearing in Pittsburgh, and he wanted me to come, but unfortunately I wasn't able to make it. But we're going to have him on one of these shows soon.
He will be great, and you should let him. You should bone up on the Smithereens and give him due on the Smithereens. I told Dennis that one of the happiest days in my life was stopping at a rest stop on the Garden State Parkway, and they now have each rest stop is named after a famous Jersey person. They have pictures of people in the New Jersey Hall of Fame, and the one that has the picture of the Smithereens and Frankie Valli, that's a great rest. That's my favorite rest stop.
Has to be. Sure.
Okay. All right. Well, everybody take care. Anthony,
that was great.
Thank you. Charles, thank you. And thank all of you out there for watching George Music for All Four Seasons.
Absolutely.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, hope you enjoyed that. A lot of information there. Very interesting. I want to thank former senior Times Magazine editor, Mr. Charles Alexander, for taking the time and discussing all this great information with Mr. Anthony Colatrella, a real Jersey boy, and myself. Questions, comments, always welcome. And take care, and appreciate you watching. And if you'd like, a little thumbs up would be nice. Be well. Bye now.